That you're joining us on this Tuesday, February 4th evening. We're so excited about tonight's show because we're going to be jumping right into this topic, Roxanne, of co-parenting when you're divorced. Or co-parenting in general is a difficult thing, but when you're divorced or separated, in fact, the official title of our show is Co-Parenting, the Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and Getting Through It All. And we're so blessed to have tonight with us two special guests with us, Dr. Aris Assimacopoulos, who is an infectious disease physician and a father of 4 daughters, but has experienced himself a divorce. He's going to talk about that experience as a professional and also as a father. And also Maria Boyle, who's no stranger to us here at Live with the Louhs. We've had her on several times, really talking about different ways that impact those who are divorced. She's done extensive work not only within her church at St. Peter's and Paul, where she runs a divorce rebuilders ministry in Glenview, Illinois, but basically offers support and guidance to those who are separated and divorced. And so we'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. If you're divorced, or maybe you're struggling with the co-parenting of being divorced or separated, we would love to hear from you. You can also email us during the show at the Louhs at ancientfaith.com. We're also simulcast broadcasting on our Louhs Facebook page, as well as on Ancient Faith's YouTube page. So definitely feel free, friends, to leave comments there. We'll definitely get to them during the show. So Maria and Dr. Aris, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you.
You know, I know before the show, Roxanne and I had been talking about this. I mean, it's amazing that, almost a quarter of all parents who are divorced are having to struggle with what that means to co-parent. And that it becomes a major issue of stress and worry, not only in front of the children, but outside of the children. And so, Maria, I'd love to just kind of start with you and just simply asking you to tell us a little bit about what your ministry over at Glenview, Illinois, at St. Peter's and Paul, what that divorce rebuilders ministry has come about, and tell us a little bit about how Dr. Aris and his involvement has also been to that ministry.
Sure. Well, I am the founder and leader of St. Peter Paul Divorce Rebuilders, which offers support and guidance for those who are separated and divorced. And I started this ministry in response to my own dealing with the emotional, financial, legal, and parenting obstacles and challenges that I faced when I got divorced. And I was looking for an Orthodox support group that dealt with divorce, and there were none. And I went to other denominations and actually led a small group in a non-denominational church until it occurred to me, why don't I just start one myself? And so it's been 19 years. In 2025 will be 19 years when I had started with 6 people. And so this is going to fizzle out in a month, okay? And it kept growing. And thanks to this show, Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne, we now, I'm going to say this because we're a team, we now have people in England, in Australia, in Canada, all over the United States who participate in this divorce support group. The next 6-week session will be starting February 11th. And you can look me up at St. Peter Paul Divorce Rebuilders group on the internet. So I met Dr. Aris as he was a participant 8 years ago when he came into one of our groups. I was then going to different churches in Chicagoland area from church to church to make sure all Orthodox were able to, come to this group and participate. And he was just separated and divorced and asking a lot of questions, how to co-parent, how to deal with the the difficulty of the legal system that can be difficult as well as helpful sometimes, how to co-parent to young girls. And as time came by, I really came to admire him in the sense that he really did take time to learn about co-parenting. He wanted to know how to be a good, positive co-parent in this context. He wanted to know what professionals said, what research said. And you also want to be aware of what are the legal obstacles and pushbacks that he would have to contend with. And we became good friends, and I've watched him be one of the exceptional parents dealing with some obstacles as well as celebrations and challenges of this co-parenting. And I thought there wouldn't be a better person who could come here and share his experiences to all of us. Thank you, Dr. Aris.
Yeah, I'm definitely want to get to that in a moment. But I think, Maria, I think just for our listeners and our viewers, I think for Roxanne and I think we obviously would know a lot of these terms, but for a lot of our audience, they may not even be aware of, what does it mean? What is sole custody or positive co-parenting and inappropriate co-parenting? Let's just kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of these terms that we're going to hear on the show as to what those are and to define them if we could.
Sure. So just briefly, sole custody is when one parent has legal and physical custody of the children. So most decision making is by that parent. They physically live in the household or the residence of that parent. When we go to co-parenting, and that is a new phenomenon. As research shows, since 2014, co-parenting has increased twofold since that time. So this is sort of a new field. I mean, we're still trying to learn to do it correctly and do it well. And because the past time, sole custody was more of the norm, I think. So we're pushing that direction, which in co-parenting, you'd have a 7-day week and both parents get 50% as much as possible of that time to be with their children in either of their residences, and also have alternate or have some kind of agreement as far as weekends are concerned, as well as participate in events and activities, get communication from the schools equally, have equally decision-making to make about their kids' welfare, health, well-being, academic events, activities, et cetera, et cetera. So the challenge is even when we have intact parents, parenting children is tough. It's tough when you have two parents in the same household who are aligned with the same values, interests, and goals. Now we have a rift in a marriage through disagreement, through different values, through growing apart, whatever that issue is. And now we're trying to see what can we do with these kids who are going to be now not in the same household, and both parents want to have equal access to them to co-parent equally. So positive co-parenting to me, and what research shows, is the focus has to be on the kids. So the mindset is, we are divorced. We have decided not to be with one another for whatever reasons. Are we interested in making sure that our children feel that they're not impacted negatively by this change? How can we make sure our kids feel loved by each of us, supported by each of us, and a common goal to make sure their health and well-being and development isn't stopped, aborted, changed, negatively impacted? And so you have to go beyond you got to think beyond the disagreements you had, beyond the events that happened that led up to the divorce, and think of the focus is, are we going to have this divorce impact the development well-being of our kids? So positive co-parenting is when their communication is positive on both sides, the co-parenting. It is when each parent values the role that each parent has to give to the children. They value and respect the role that they will play. They're there to celebrate together things that go well with their children. They're able to coach each other if they feel one can learn from another and how to deal with difficult parenting or discipline situations. And so the focus is on the children to support and create a healthy relationship, not only between the parents, but also so the kids can also see that healthy relationship. So the benefits of that is, go ahead, Father.
I just wanted to ask you real quick, then, Maria. I think would be great for our listeners is, all this sounds, I think, so beautiful and so correct. What are you seeing in your experience? Because obviously people that are coming to you in your Rebuilders ministry that you have up in Glenview are coming because they know that they are desiring that there is something that they need some guidance or some comfort or some consolation with. But when you have a parent, who is considering a divorce right now, or has major problems in their marriage, what are the drawbacks of not thinking about how to co-parent after that separation? In other words, what could be the consequences? What are we seeing in children now that do not have a healthy relationship with their parents, because the parents don't have a healthy relationship with themselves, and they've never really discussed co-parenting outside of that marriage? When they do get a divorce, how does not having that kind of conversation about what positive co-parenting, what kind of negativities can that actually look like in the life of a child?
In other words, how can it affect the children?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, it is. Dr. Aris can address this later, but I have seen in the Divorce Rebuilders group, which I've done now for many years, that there's a very few good positive co-parenting situations. Usually, either perhaps one or the other or both parents, and sometimes it's just one. Sometimes these behaviors step more from how co-parents feel about each other than it has to do anything with the kids.
Right.
So then the focus is on the kids. As a counselor with 35 years experience counseling students from college, from high school to college, I have found that when parents positively co-parent and communicate and value each other, kids are emotionally stable, they do well academically, they're less likely to use substances, they're more involved in extracurricular activities, they have more long-lasting friendships, they are more goal-oriented. The ones that are not, and I've known these parents and I've known these students well, are having more difficulty being motivated in school. I mean, if there is disagreements in the household and one parent is saying to you, don't tell your dad this, or don't tell your mom this, or there's inconsistent parenting. One parent says you can stay up to 1 o'clock at night playing video games. The other parent says, get your homework done, whatever. If one parent undermines the other parent, if one parent disagrees and tries to demean the authority of the other, what did that parent know? He doesn't know anything. I have all this experience. You go with me. Refusal to communicate. Then we talk about emotional instability. A kid wants to trust their parents. They want to trust they're in good hands. They want to trust that they're safe and secure. And when they feel there's discord between the two parents that they both love, that makes them feel very uncomfortable, very insecure. That can only manifest in their day-to-day. And to be able to do well in school, you got to focus. That means you've got to be calm. That means you've got to be self-regulated. Okay, yes, even in best parenting situations, there will be arguments, even positive, yes, but there's negotiation. There's resiliency. Okay, there's, okay, you can't get the kids this weekend. Let me do what I can do. I'll help next weekend, Then the kids learn to trust their parents, that they will work it out inevitably, even though there's disagreements, which gives them trust in themselves and confidence. It's huge.
I love that, Maria. And Dr. Aris, let's talk about the strategies here that are really important to use when co-parenting. We hear so much about individuals who, parents who are supposed to stay in their own lane, right? So to speak, if, mom isn't doing it right, dad's supposed to kind of stay in his lane and vice versa. Yet, there's this sort of struggle with how it's happening in that second house that I'm not okay with. And I would imagine that the rift there is large, because they couldn't get along when they were married. So then, conversely in the divorce, we don't necessarily expect to be on the same page. Maybe you could speak a little bit into some of the strategies that are important to sort of move toward that positive co-parenting.
Sure. And later there's a particular book and author I think if anybody's struggling with that area would find very useful. We can talk about. I think focusing on staying in your lane is really important, and as Maria and I talked about this, the phrase that came to mind for me was move on. Just don't get stuck, because there's a tendency to get stuck in that fight, that disagreement, and just never move on. And whether that is just because you're hurt and angry, or whether that's because somehow maybe even you feel divorce is wrong, and so you feel to be okay and to move on is like somehow damaging your faith, or is like, I must not believe in God because I'm able to move on. But you really have to drop that. And one phrase this one particular author uses a lot, which I like, is, it should be that way, but it's not. And the other one is, well, it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
But it is.
Right.
Right.
I love
And it really, I was amazed that I read that phrase and I said, wow, that's great. Like,
Right.
anytime something goes wrong, I just go, yeah, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So that's it. So, you, as you're talking about, you have to let go of all that other stuff that isn't being done the way you think it should be done in the other household. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but you just have to let it go. And when Maria and I talked, kind of prepping for ideas about this, one thing that that we both thought about, and it was that you have to have your identity and focus on who you are, what you want your household to look like, and what you want your children to see about you. And rather than, for example, rather than spending time criticizing the other parent, which is obviously, whether you're right or wrong, is going to probably hurt the children's feelings, or even if you are actually right, it may end up, having your children think less of you, or perhaps even think you're the problem because you spend so much time criticizing the other parent, even if you are right. And so focusing on who you are, what you want the kids to see, stating things in a manner that, well, over here in this household, this is how we do things, and this is how we choose to do them, and focus on those ideals. I think that is really a good start to kind of staying in your lane, giving the kids a good example, and in a sense, being able to voice your values, which I think will help the children without necessarily focusing a whole lot on criticizing somebody else's values.
Well, and I do love that sort of positive movement toward what you can control, and to really live the message you want to be seen and absorbed. I can't help but wonder, how do things like personality disorders, mood disorders, general issues in another parent affect that co-parenting? That let's just say one parent is really able to move into positive co-parenting because they have the internal resources to, and the other parent is genuinely struggling with the tools or even the the emotional health and well-being, to be able to do that. How does that work?
Well, that can be difficult, and I've known a number of people in those situations, and I think what becomes even more important then is to focus on your lane and who you are, and really embrace, as you said, the things that you can and can't change, the way it is instead of the way you want it to be. Often, folks that have those types of, well, probably more familiar than I am, that have those types of disorders are not going to seek help. They don't really believe that they have any issues to take care of. To them, their behavior feels completely normal. And it can create a fair amount of havoc from what I've discussed with other people. And I think it really just pushes you to focus on those core values even more sharply. It's very easy to get lost down the rabbit hole of the conflict, and especially if you have a lot of conflict, especially difficult. So even more important to focus. And it's really, let's be honest. It's a matter of, fall down, get up until hopefully you spend more time in the upright position, than falling down and struggling to get back up again. I found it very helpful to try and educate myself. There's several authors out there that, that address those situations, and it can be very, if you don't understand what's going on, I think that can be an issue. And I think once you educate yourself about and see what's going on, I think it certainly makes it easier to deal with. And for example, I mean, that's what's wonderful about Maria's group, right? Is you're going there and having this conversation with other people who are experiencing the same thing. And you suddenly say, wow, like I'm not the only one. Look at that. This person this person had it worse than I did, and so, you start to feel less abnormal and more like, okay, yeah, the other people experience this too.
Let me ask you this too, Dr. Aris, and just kind of building on what Roxanne was sharing, and maybe Roxanne, you and Maria and Aris can maybe address this. I love what you're talking about, that obviously staying in your lane and knowing that, ultimately you don't have control over what's going on in someone else's house. But, for a lot of people, especially in my own ministry as a priest, when I'm dealing with couples that are experiencing a very difficult divorce, there are significant differences in parenting, even the way in which they parent their children, what they accept as as valid parenting, and what they accept, what they consider to be not valid parenting or invalid parenting. How do you navigate that? Because I think it's easy to kind of stay, in your lane when, one may have certain differences that you may not be as passionate about. But when one parent is kind of, guiding your children in a way that you feel is destructive towards them, how do you have that conversation with your children, especially if you're dealing with adolescents or young, children, that about, because I think for a lot of parents, we've never experienced this, but I would imagine that there's a lot of fear as a parent going, oh my gosh, the next week they're going to be spending time with, dad, and dad is doing this. And, how do I, there's this constant just anxiety that's filled. Can you kind of guide us with that? And before you answer that, Dr. Aris, I'd love to just remind our viewers that you can call in, speak with Dr. Aris, Maria, or us at 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-237-2346, or leave a comment on our YouTube page. Roxanne's actually overseeing all that, as well as if you want to make a phone call, or you can call in. And if you want to be anonymous, you're totally able to do so. Our producer will make sure that happens. So yeah, Aris, I'd love to hear your response to that.
Well, again, I also go back to, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. I think the first thing is to refocus yourself. Don't go down the rabbit hole of the conflict. I mean, there's of course a line. I mean, if there's something that's dangerous for the children, something that is severe enough that you feel you need to, get your attorney or the court involved, then you should do that by all means. I mean, I'm not at all advocating ignoring things that are dangerous or detrimental enough to the child that the court and attorney should be involved. So that, I think that goes without saying. Beyond that, I really think you have to focus on it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And then, and then revert to, I'm going to make an extra effort to discuss why I believe these things are good. And I think that it's okay. I mean, I know that you can read books, you can look around. Sometimes people will say, don't say anything at all. Mm-hmm. I think it's okay to say that you disagree with something to your children. I think that's all right. I would be cautious in that I wouldn't be saying those things randomly, but if it's something that generally a reasonable parent would probably disagree with, then I think it's fair game to say that you disagree with that. But I wouldn't personally spend a lot of time on it. I would spend more time sort of emphasizing the positive in the opposite direction. We over here, we don't like to do B so much. We think A is better. We think A is better because of this, and this is why. And these are the reasons why we do things this way over here. And let I mean, it's difficult. There's no question, because especially if your kids are an age where you feel that perhaps they can't judge for themselves, then it does become more difficult. And I think you have to just hope that by really painting the clearest picture for them that you can, that they're going to get older and they're going to start to see it. I mean, a lot of people, say, and I think they're right, that the kids, as they get older, they will see. I was seeing a therapist for a while, and, he said, the kids will see. that they, and you don't always believe what what the therapist is telling you right away. But I mean, multiple times people said, you should just wait, the kids will see, and I think that's probably true, although it's definitely scary to not really be able to see the future.
I was going to ask, Roxanne, I'm thinking of several people that I know, that are across our path that, when their children are going into a toxic home outside of their home, in other words, they feel more safe at one home and then they're going to another home, and they're actually, not only are they being taught unhealthy things in that other home, but they're also have a tremendous amount of anxiety, unable to sleep while they're there, uncomfortable there. I mean, how do you guide, a mother or a father who are sending their children to the other parent, and when they're dealing with that that level of not only bad parenting, but also this anxiety that the children have in just going to the home?
I think it's really important to give a voice, permission to feel. For kids, there's this sort of an incredibly important need to feel like everything that I feel can have a voice here. And I know sometimes in co-parenting situations, the thought really always is, never talk about the other parent. And I think sometimes, when we go to such an extreme, kids sort of feel almost like they question themselves, their own experience, guilty in sharing things, and maybe a bit invalidated. I can remember one, kid in particular, after 10 years post divorce, he said, I really felt so invalidated in what I would feel when I would talk about what I was experiencing, because my mom wouldn't say a word. And, it was as if she was scared to step in, but I knew this wasn't right. What was happening over at that house wasn't right. And mom would never say anything. And, he said, I started to question myself. And as he got older, of course, and as you said, the kids will see, they always do, by the time they're adolescents, you can't convince them who a parent is. They've defined it for themselves. They've seen it for themselves, and they're, nothing you say is going to change that. But I do think that as they're, through childhood, I think sometimes that can be hard. So I'm sort of a big fan of really giving them that space to acknowledge and talk about, and eventually sort of moving not into, character assassinations, but more into adaptations. What are we going to do? What do you need? What would be helpful here? And to sort of move into that dimension of sort of problem solving without sort of attacking, the character. And I'd love for you both to sort of speak into that, but that's kind of where my head goes with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, for example, having a therapist, I think would be, great for kids. And I agree with you 100% that if they don't have somebody to validate what they're actually experiencing, it's essentially you're helping to gaslight your own child by pretending, and that I don't think is right, but I agree with you. You don't want to go in the direction of character assassination, but here's reality. Here's what it is. Here's how I view reality. Here's this reality here, and how can we deal with that? How can you deal with it? But yeah, I agree. You don't want your child to begin questioning what they're seeing right in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maria, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
No, I agree with Dr. Aris that, having a strong identity, one consistent parent does millions of good things for a kid's stability and his emotional security. And I think establishing a family identity is very important. For me, when I got divorced, it was very obvious to me that my ex had different values and goals, was going that direction, or was not giving my kids a sense of identity, who they were. And I felt propelled that I had to go 150% more than when I was married. And I just took it for granted that these things are going to evolve, to make sure I defined what was important to me as a parent, what was important to me as an individual, and what did I want to make sure that I taught my kids about. So it was about my family, their grandparents, where they came from, the struggles, my struggles, to get an idea of what is my family stories. Kids need to attach to stories. When you read If you apply for a job, or no, I've written millions of college recommendations for students, and I've also told students to write essays with the story, because what will stand out to whoever's reading it is not their GPA, not their grades, not how many extracurricular activities, but what they tell about themselves as to what they learned during the 4 years. So what did our family learn through the last decades as they came through? What they should be proud of, what challenges, obstacles they overcome, as examples as obstacles, and give them encouragement of the obstacles they can overcome. So for my own children, I did with faith, family, integrity, service, self-discipline, and hard work. We talked about that all the time. We have faith, and we demonstrate by going to church. We talked about family, again, our heritage, our grandparents, our roots in orthodoxy, the Greek language, as much as or little they learned. Integrity, how to be true and kind to people and truthful and trust. Not using swear words, not lying in front of, within the family, without. Service, what are we going to do to help one another? Not only did I talk about it, I had to make sure that I exemplified and showed that as examples continuously. Self-discipline. Can you sit down and start a project and finish it? You're going to clean your room. Will you finish it? You're going to start your homework. That was an important part of our identity as a family. We Boyles finish the things we start.
And Maria, let me
Pappists
clarify.
Do that as well.
These were values you were establishing post-divorce in the family identity you were now creating.
Right. I was, Dr. Roxanne, it was part of who I was, but I punctuated them and made sure, because I knew that there's an opposing force that may go against it or not, confirm it or validate it, whatever. So I want to make sure that they knew what I stand for, what we as a family entity was. And I also wanted to demonstrate that. The other thing was self-discipline and, of course, hard work. Not be afraid of hard work. And examples were, plumbers, electricians, even garbage, people who pick up the garbage. Let's honor them, because if they didn't do that work, we would do it. And you know what? It's okay to get dirty. It's okay to do these things. And it's hard. And sometimes you do hard work and you don't get the payoff. You don't get paid, or you don't get the results you want to. It's okay. It's the attempt. So anyhow, I can go on and on, go on and on. But so I took the faith, family, integrity, service, self-discipline, and hard work. And that was the core of our identity as a family. And whether you're a Johnson or a Pappas, everybody can make those values. And that becomes your pillar when the storms and when the words and when the disagreements, that is your pillar that you stand by. And then your kid looks at you and trusts that you're going to fall on these pillars to make a decision. And they can fall on these pillars to help them navigate how they will make decisions in their life, because they saw it work in their own family.
Right. It's like what we oftentimes talk about this, having a family mission statement. And I love the fact that you're really having these core principles that are really the fruits of your family, what you're hoping to be evidence of your family tree. Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we're talking about co-parenting, the good, the bad, the difficulty that people that are divorced or that are separated are going through. We want to dedicate a show to that. We'd love to hear from you. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. We're speaking with Dr. Aris as well as Maria Boyle, both of whom have experienced divorce. And Maria, in her case, has a ministry specifically for those who are divorced and separated at their parish at St. Peter's and Paul in Glenview, Illinois. They're so gracious to spend the night with us talking about this issue, so we're grateful that they're there with us. We're going to take a quick break, but I do want to kind of tease for when we come back from the break, and that is to Aris and to Maria. I'd love to talk about what it means to surrender when you know that your children may, when you're yearning so much for them to see your side or to understand your viewpoint, and you're surrendering to knowing that, they may lean more into their father or their mother's side as opposed to what their viewpoint. Where does surrender come in on this? We'll talk about that right when we come back right here on Live with the Louhs.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
darkest moments on the cross, Jesus uttered 7 statements. His words offer us principles to live by, lessons of hope, peace, and comfort. I'm Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
And I'm Father Nicholas Lowe.
And our new book, 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, is all about how Christ's light transcends our darkness.
Christ's final words have the power to bring us into the light of his love and protection, providing wisdom and direction to follow when we face our own dark seasons. Get your copy today by going to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Welcome back to Live with the Louhs. We are speaking about co-parenting, the good, the bad, the ugly, and getting through it all. And before the break, we were speaking a little bit into, the definitions of co-parenting, what it looks like, what's healthy, and where we tend to really arrive at a lot of obstacles. And we have so much chat in the chat room. I'm so excited to see everyone here. The very first question that even came in was, my only question is, what is the definition of co-parenting? And, yes, we have to ask that, because co-parenting in so many situations looks so different. And I think at times we don't know, is my situation healthy? Is my situation normal? Is this what everyone else experiences? And so I'd love for you guys to speak into that in just a moment. And I hear a lot in the chat room about having to parallel parent because exes do refuse to work together, right, when it's not something that's convenient for them. So thanks everyone for being in the chat. So let's talk about that. What about this notion of surrendering and having to sort of parallel parent side by side when you do feel like an ex is really not harboring the very values, that you want to speak life into over your children?
Well, I think, and again, the author I talked about addresses this topic very well. In fact, his premise is a sense that I think he uses the phrase trendy co-parenting and says that basically, like, that doesn't really, that's kind of a bill of goods. Like, people have said this is how it should look, and you know what? It doesn't look that way. And he's very much an advocate for parallel parenting. And I think it can be actually, given the alternative, if you're in a relationship that's very high conflict and things are very different, I think parallel parenting is actually a very good option. I think it's freeing because you get to, you just do your thing and don't worry about it. And especially if there's a lot of conflict between the two parties, then I mean, it can go a long ways to resolve that. So I wouldn't necessarily, again, you might not choose to do it that way, but I think if you're in a situation where you're thinking about it, it's probably a great alternative.
But how about when the parental agreement is being abused? I mean, this is something that I run into quite a bit with families that, we've got something in place and it is just not being respected.
Yeah. Well, I think those are the situations in which, while at the same time you're sort of, trying to stay in your own lane, I mean, then you need to fall back on your attorney. You shouldn't, those types of agreements should not be let go. And there is a tendency, I think, for some people to just say, oh, okay, it's too much hassle, I don't want to deal with that. I wouldn't do that. I mean, at the same time, I'm trying to stay in my lane. If I were a person that had issues with a parenting agreement not being followed, I mean, I would suggest that you go after those, and use your attorney and use the court system to, either get it enforced or to alter it. Perhaps it's not working for either one. Something different should be done. I don't know, but yeah, you shouldn't. I don't think it's okay to let that kind of stuff slide at all.
Dr. Aris, I remember when we were discussing this particular subject, I took some notes that I thought were really wise. And you said, don't let the legal system push you into an agreement that will not work for you. In other words, know what the situation is, know who the other co-parent is, and try to keep that in mind. And you also said, look at your situation, the person you will co-parent with, and anticipate what you will need in the co-parenting agreement that will work in ups and downs. So you can do that at the beginning, or you can do it, you're saying right now, alter the agreement later on, as you can anticipate that yes, it won't solve all problems, but I think it could take away some of the tension, some of the difficulty, so that, again, the legal system is there, but you don't let them dictate to you. You can tell them, this is really what I need, and work with those people, lawyers who can do that. And of course, move on, because don't think that it's one and done, that you can alter, correct, and change both, parental agreements and also, child support. That's one of the frustrations. People get divorced and think that's it. And then a year or two later, other things arise and you're back to reevaluating things again.
How about in situations where, we've seen this occur quite a few times before, where, you're well-intended in wanting the child to have a relationship with both parents, right? But you're starting to see some behaviors in the other parent that is really concerning. Behaviors that, you don't necessarily want around your child. At what point, and we've come across this in certain situations where, you're sending your child over, but there's a struggle with alcoholism, and that parent is drinking around the child, maybe forgetting to pick them up at school, and at what point do you sort of go, okay, I know I want my child to have this relationship with the other parent, but if they're not demonstrating the health that is required of a parent who's responsible over a child, at what point do you sort of, say, I don't want to push this anymore?
I don't think you let that go for a second. I mean, honestly, I don't think you let those infractions go at all. Things, for example, substance use. I mean, you shouldn't tolerate that. That I think you should, take to your attorney, to the court system, whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add, I think, Aris, is for a lot of people, you obviously think, know that the expense for a lot of, obviously can get out of control, that every time that you're contacting a lawyer or whatever, I think that I totally agree with what both of you are saying. I think that, obviously there are things that are non-negotiable, that when there's a break in certain, core values that we want to have as a family, and that person's not exercising, or that risks the safety of that child, should obviously be, taken into account for them. But I also think that too, how important it must be to create a village for that child of people that think like you as the parent does. And I think obviously we're talking about a church environment where people are going to be able to co-parent with you that are not necessarily the spouse. And I think that's one of the things, that's the beauty of the church, is that I hope that the church can be, is to be a resource, to be like that village that we talk a lot about, within the church, that to help co-parent, so that there's other voices besides mom saying or dad saying that this is the way we're going to raise our children, because the principles that you mentioned, Maria, are fantastic, but those are hard, fruits of the Spirit kind of principles that we are all called to live by. And why not have that be something that is basically shared through the church, or in a setting that helps you to say, well, it's not just me sharing this to my kids, it's my kids seeing it active in other environments.
Absolutely.
I think surrounding kids by other like-minded adults who are going to give similar examples is excellent. They should have a large world to look out to and see what's important.
Maria, we've talked about this, and I think, I don't think it's a topic that we should not, I feel like we need to definitely address it. But, for a lot of people that are divorced, both of you experience this very difficult, event in your lives. Sometimes people can kind of go into like their own little cave, and they can come into the cave of darkness, where they just kind of stay to themselves. They oftentimes withdraw themselves from the very thing that would give them peace, or not necessarily peace, but be a place where they could grow in Christ, and that is the church. Sometimes they don't feel welcome in church. They can feel like they're being judged in the church, or that people are looking at them in a different way, which continues to add to that co-parenting, and really, in many ways, can limit the opportunity for a parent to try to get help outside of themselves or their own little network. What would you tell, Maria and Aris, I'd love to hear from both of you, what would you tell a wife or a husband that's tuning in now who is in the midst of a terrible divorce right now, and those are the thoughts that are running through their mind? What words of advice? Maria, let's start with you.
It's so easy not to want to express to other people because of shame, feeling you'll be stigmatized. It's such to share what the pain you're going through. And you can't share your pain with everyone or anyone. It's got to be trusted people that can hear you, can be by your side, whether they've been divorced or not. And I was, I went to my priest right away and told him about my situation. And he would call me every 3 weeks to see how I was doing. How was I doing? And one time he said, what you've done for fun? Well, we have pizzas on Friday afternoon. He goes, that's not fun. Where do you go? Have you seen a movie? No. He says, look, I'm taking money from my wallet. It's not from my church's wallet. This is from my wallet. Here's $50. You take your kids to a movie. The next time he called me, I said, I know there's 3 women in the house and 1 male, my son. He's the only male. He can't even get a shower. The 3 of us are taking showers, washing our hair. He's got to wait outside. He goes to his friend's house to take a shower to get to his game. And I said, I don't feel like there's too many women around here. He goes, I know the man for you, George, whatever his name was. George was a married man. He took Christopher to baseball games,
wow, and
just sat with them and he gave him an experience. Okay. Because his Nuno was too busy running a restaurant 24/7, So what we have to do is reach out to people, and it might be and create that village. It might be not people that are your cousins, your uncles, or your not. Right. It could be new people who want to. And I tell people in divorce rebuilders, ask for help. Part of our support group is we ask each other for help. We bond one another. We chat with one another. We have an app right now that we talk to one another. Is that reach out. And when you reach out to someone, they're looking as a Christian for an opportunity to serve. And you get help and you feel the blessing of someone reaching out and helping you, and your heart gets filled. And they get the blessing of being able to give what they have to offer to you and feel good about it. It's a win-win situation. And if you don't say, I need, or I want, or could you help me? Or if someone doesn't come to you and say, I've seen you by yourself without your husband for the next 2-3 weeks. Is he sick? Is there something I can do? It could be just open like that. That person feels seen and noticed. And maybe they will say 2 words to you. And maybe that's something will start a relationship. So yes, you've got to take some risks. You got to take some chances. You got to reach out for help. And not only will you helping yourself, you're helping another person who wants to give and wants to nurture and wants to assist an opportunity to do God's work.
Aris, what is one bit of advice that you would share that was very helpful for you in this process, that kind of, I think, would help a mother or father who's going through the trenches right now?
Well, move on. Always move on. Always focus on where you're going and what you want to be, as opposed to what you're coming out of. And don't lose your community. I mean, you should. You might experience. I mean, you probably go into your cave for a while. There's just no question about that. But and you may go back and experience church differently than you did before. You should always remember, I think, that people really don't care as much as you think they do. Even though you feel like everybody's looking at you like there's something wrong with you, they're not, and they really don't care that much. I mean, it's as sad as that. I don't mean it they don't care about you, but like it's not as big of a deal to them as you think it is. So, you might go and find other friends there in a similar situation. You might find other ways to interact with church. You might join something. Maybe you have more time now. You can actually do something else there. But you'll find people, and you shouldn't lose that as a
community.
casualty.
The community is so important. And I love the idea of identifying a need and asking for it. I do think that's something that many people struggle with, divorced or otherwise, being able to first know what I need, but second, be able to ask for it. Two fundamental skills in any transition or chapter they were going into. I do want to get to one question that came in via email before the show. And it's from a mother who is asking, what do I do when my child consistently does not want to go to the other house?
Yeah. Well, I think in those situations, you should, I think, gently trying to find out why. What is that all about? I would definitely I always say, first take a good look in the mirror and make sure that, you're not imagining that that's what the child wants, or that you are not contributing to that feeling in any way. But I would find out why. And if it's really something serious, or, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, or you're afraid that you're going to, muddy the waters by talking about it, get a therapist, find somebody. But I think you have to find out why that really is, and whether that is just something as simple as separation anxiety from one parent, or whether there's really something going on. If there's something going on, I wouldn't let it go.
Yeah. Okay.
Maria, what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on the age of the child. If it's a young child, I would take it much more seriously. Right away, I would get to a therapist or someone to talk to them, or a counselor at school to find what's going on. I would, I think if it's an older kid or older student, I think you can start, asking some questions about, what is it about going to the other parent's house that makes you feel comfortable? Is there something I can do to make it better? Is there a discussion I can have? Give me a hint as to, no, I can't tell you. I can't tell. If that child is very evasive, it will make me more and more nervous. If over time they talk to me, or talk to a therapist, or talk to someone else, I feel more comfortable about it. But the more evasive it would be, the more I would be worried about it and try to take more, stronger actions as getting that child some help. I would not want to ignore a child unless it's very young, even young. If it's older or young, persistently, and not be able to define or give you a hint as to why, then that would make me suspicious that other parent is threatening that child or telling them not to speak. It would make me very nervous as a mother, as a parent.
Right. I wanted to acknowledge several people that have been texting through the chat room. Thank you to Steve. Thank you to Louis and Laura. All of you who are filling up our chat room. We appreciate your comments as well. Keep having them come in. Maria, I know we only have a few minutes, and this is probably a question that probably deserves a totally separate show. But when the other spouse begins to date someone else, or that dating relationship becomes now another mother or another father, stepfather, if you will, in that relationship, how does that co-parenting, how does that impact? What are some words of advice that you would give to a single parent who may be seeing their ex now getting married and introducing a new spouse into that relationship?
Well, you have to sort of wait and see to see how that happens. But obviously that your child has had some kinds of encounters with that other now spouse. And so hopefully that can allay your fear. Obviously, you don't have much control telling the new spouse what to do or what not to do. I think that is, I don't know, Dr. Aris, what do you think about that? That hasn't come up, so I would not know, except for a situation, what to exactly do, just generally.
I mean, I think you refocus on the same core principles you would like to have been using up to that point. I think you have to be careful that you're not finding a problem where there isn't one simply because maybe you feel jealous or you that sort of brings out these bad feelings. That's your problem, not the child's. I mean, I think if you can get yourself to a point where you can say, hey, if this other person is a nice person and decent and maybe has good values and treats my child well, then let me just embrace them in a way and be okay with it. Now, if you can get to that point, that would be great. But again, I wouldn't let things slide that you wouldn't let slide, for your co-parent either.
What do you think, Roxanne?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where really good boundaries come in, right? Like, as I'm listening to you guys, knowing what's mine, what are my feelings here versus what are my child's feelings? And I think that, so often that line is so blurred. We don't know what's ours. We just know we have a complicated set of emotions. And I think it really takes that, moment of stepping back and looking in the mirror and go, okay, what part of this is mine? This could actually be really healthy for my child. Perhaps this person makes my ex much happier, and so that is going to be a better parent for my child, right? And this could be a good thing. So I have to really set aside my own feelings about that in order to really look at, what are the needs of the child. And I think so often, in parenting, I mean, this is such a hard thing to do, right? Are we parenting out of our emotional state or are we parenting out of what the child needs? And this is a line that so often I think parents fail to draw just in general, and in divorce, I would imagine it's just, that much harder because the emotions are that much more complex in every situation.
Well, and I think too, as for a lot of us, I think even as us as parents, I mean, parenting is one of the hardest things you do anyway. And, we don't always get it right. We make a lot of mistakes, but, we oftentimes think that we know what's best for our children. And because we sometimes see them the way they were at one point and not necessarily as they are. And, obviously at times we've got to let them learn and just experience, a situation where, maybe mom and dad are not going to be together, and there is going to be a divorce, but that obviously the importance of letting them know that although their life is going to be different, that their love for them is not, and reminding them of that this is still a safe place, that this is still a safe base for them to be at. And I think for the parents that are, maybe struggling in their marriage right now, just as a priest, I'm sharing this, as I just would make sure that you do all that you can. If you know that this is, no matter what, you're going to get a divorce, there's, things, obviously I would have you consult your priest before doing anything. But if that's the route that in consultation with your priest, that this is what needs to happen, I definitely would recommend going to counseling before the divorce for parenting, knowing how and what that parenting is going to look like. So that you guys are already laying the framework, because at the end of the day, I mean, salvifically, we talk about that as Christians. We're not about this. Our salvation is not based upon us individually getting into heaven. It's bringing one another into heaven. It's leading people to Christ. And so, and that obviously starts with my family and making sure I'm doing so. So I think that's so important is in getting into a Christian counseling or a counseling where you're actually having an open, candid conversation about how are we going to raise our kids that when they're at dad's house or at mom's house, they're two different people, but the morals and the principles and the values of the family are the same. I love
that. I mean, we've always, and you guys have really echoed this, I've always read, for kids, and I've always told parents who are so worried about how's our divorce going to impact, our children. This is always the biggest question I hear when couples are sort of moving to this place. And I'm, listen, divorce is not what affects your children. It is the health of the co-parenting relationship following the divorce that affects your child, right? So if you can be healthy as co-parents, and you've defined so much of what that healthy co-parenting looked like in the beginning of this show, that's really what affects the health and well-being of kids. Kids are pretty resilient, right? And I tend to think they're happier when their parents are happier, right? Also,
absolutely, absolutely. I want to just give a real quick shout out to all of the people that are in the chat room. Great comments. Laura, thank you so much. I read your statements. Please, we'd love to have you continue to share those comments in future shows. Lucas, also, we apologize that you tried calling in and weren't able to get on. But thank you all. Thank everyone that's in the chat room that shared their comments. We're up at the end of our show, which is every week it ends up ending so quickly. But we want to thank you, Maria, and thank you so much, Dr. Aris, for taking the time to not only be vulnerable with us about your own journeys, but also to share with us some really great advice for those who are trying to co-parent in a very difficult season in their life. And so thanks for sharing all that with us. We appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thanks to Simon Nelson for producing tonight's show. And we also, as we invite you every single week, friends, if you want to find out where our next journeys are as far as our retreats are concerned, check us out on our website, thelouhs.com, as well as sign up for our daily inspirational messages by going to our website, thelouhs.com. God bless you all, and see you all next Tuesday for a brand new Live with the Louhs. Have a great night.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of their books Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, and 6 Hours, 7 Lessons, How Christ's Light Transcends Our Darkness, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.